The water is vanishing. Right now, across China, rivers are running dry, lakes are turning to dust, and the taps of the world's most populous nation are about to run empty. But China has a solution, a terrifying solution. They're going to steal water from everyone else. With control of Tibet's vast water resources, Asia's water tower that feeds over 1.4 billion people across the continent, Beijing has engineered the world's most extensive dam network, 87,000 structures that dominate Asia's river systems. And now they're turning off the taps. Countries downstream are already feeling the devastation. Farmlands withering, fisheries collapsing, entire communities facing extinction. This isn't just an environmental disaster, it's a calculated act of hydrological warfare, and the world isn't ready for what comes next. What's happening now isn't chaos, it's strategy. Since China annexed Tibet in 1951, they didn't just gain territory, they seized control of the source waters for most of Asia's great rivers. For decades, they've been patient, building, planning, creating the infrastructure for absolute control. While the world obsesses over military buildups, missile tests, and trade wars, China has been quietly waging a different kind of battle, one for the most precious resource of all. And now the crisis is accelerating. The headlines will tell you China is facing water scarcity, but that barely scratches the surface. Despite having 20% of the world's population, China possesses only 7% of global freshwater resources. But it gets worse. The water China does have is in the wrong place. Northern China, home to 40% of the population and 45% of its agriculture, has just 4% of the country's water. Meanwhile, the south has 80% of the water, but not enough farmland to use it. Beijing, the capital city of 21 million people, now has water availability comparable to countries in the Middle East. Each resident has access to just 120 cubic meters per year, an amount that qualifies as extreme water scarcity under UNICEF standards. The numbers are stark. According to recent reports from the Chinese Ministry of Water Resources, per capita water availability has dropped to approximately 2,000 cubic meters, just one-third of the global average of 6,200 and rapidly approaching the international water scarcity threshold of 1,700 cubic meters. Former Premier Wen Jiabao wasn't exaggerating when he warned that water shortages threaten the very survival of the Chinese nation. This isn't hyperbole, it's hydropolitics. Think that's bad? Wait until you hear what's happening underground. Over 80% of China's groundwater is now contaminated to the point where it can't be safely used, not for drinking, not for agriculture, not even for industry. In some northern industrial cities, the groundwater has become so toxic that it can literally catch fire. And the situation is only getting worse. Climate change is accelerating the meltdown of Tibetan glaciers, the source of most of China's major rivers. According to Greenpeace, these ice reserves could reach peak water, the point where meltwater supply begins to permanently decline as early as 2030. What's happening in China now is the world's largest water redistribution effort. Groundwater depletion across the north has become so severe that China was forced to divert water from the south. In Beijing, water levels became so critical that the government launched the massive South-North Water Transfer Project, an infrastructure system of canals, tunnels, and pumping stations designed to move water from the Yangtze River Basin to the parched cities of the North China Plain, home to over 400 million people. According to a 2023 study by the National Climate Center, about 28,000 rivers, over half of China's once mapped waterways, have disappeared entirely since the 1990s. This isn't gradual change, it's hydrological collapse. For China's leadership, this isn't just an environmental challenge, it's an existential threat to the regime itself. No water means no food. No food means instability, and instability is the Chinese Communist Party's greatest fear. But here's where things go off the rails. China's solution to its water crisis isn't conservation or pollution control. It's control. Total, absolute control of Asia's rivers. Over the past 3 decades, China has assembled the world's largest hydrological control system. The scale is almost incomprehensible. But it's not just the number that matters, it's the location. By strategically placing dams near international borders, China has positioned itself to control the headwaters of 10 major river systems that flow into 18 downstream countries. The Mekong, which 60 million people depend on in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. The Brahmaputra, which sustains nearly 200 million people in India and Bangladesh. The Indus and its tributaries, which are the lifeblood of Pakistan. When you control water flow to these countries, you don't just have influence, you have domination. This dam empire isn't the product of coincidence. It's a deliberate strategy, decades in the making. You think that's concerning? What you're about to find out next will completely blow your mind. These aren't just ordinary dams, they're weaponized infrastructure. And the crown jewel, the Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest hydroelectric power station. This mammoth structure spans the Yangtze River with a wall that generates around 100 terawatt-hours of electricity annually, enough to power entire nations. But the Three Gorges Dam isn't just about power generation. It's a symbol of China's massive hydraulic engineering ambitions. The dam's construction displaced 1.3 million people and submerged 13 cities, 140 towns, and 1,350 villages. Archaeological sites, cultural relics, and ecosystems were lost forever beneath the rising waters. Some Western engineers initially believed the project was technically impossible. Even many Chinese experts raised alarms about environmental impacts, sedimentation issues, and geological risks. Beijing pushed ahead anyway, because the Three Gorges Dam isn't just infrastructure. It's a demonstration of the Communist Party's power to bend nature itself to its will. And it's just the beginning. Modern dam systems come equipped with advanced sensors, automated controls, and precision management capabilities. They don't just generate electricity, they gather data, control flow rates with surgical precision, and can be operated remotely. This gives China unprecedented control. They can release water suddenly, causing flash floods that devastate communities downstream, hold back water during critical planting seasons, destroying harvest across entire regions, time water releases to maximize their own hydroelectric output, regardless of the impact on others. And here's the kicker: China has consistently rejected any legally binding water sharing agreements with downstream countries. In 1997, they were one of only 3 countries to vote against the UN Watercourses Convention, the international framework for managing shared rivers. The message is clear: China will do what it wants with its water. But if this is just about dams and water management, why call it warfare? Because water isn't just another resource, it's life itself. Throughout history, controlling water has meant controlling people. Ancient Mesopotamian rulers diverted rivers to starve enemies into submission. Military strategists have targeted war infrastructure to force capitulation. What China is doing now, though, is different. It's not tactical, it's strategic. They're not just using water as a weapon during conflict. They're using it as a form of silent coercion every day without firing a shot. In 2019, something extraordinary happened on the Mekong River that revealed China's water strategy in action. While Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam suffered their worst drought in a century, satellite data from Eyes on Earth revealed a shocking truth. China's portion of the river basin received normal to above-average rainfall. Their dams were full, yet downstream, the river was at record lows. For 6 months, China's dams completely blocked the annual monsoon rise in river level, something that hadn't happened since modern records began. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The results were catastrophic across Southeast Asia. Cambodia's Tonle Sap Lake, which normally provides 500,000 tons of fish annually, failed to flood, devastating fish stocks. Thailand's sugar production dropped by approximately 20 to 30%. Vietnamese rice fields were destroyed by saltwater intrusion as the river ran too low to keep the ocean at bay, all while China had plenty of water. When confronted with evidence, Beijing released a small amount of water, but only after the damage was done and only enough to appear cooperative. This wasn't a natural disaster, it was a demonstration of power. The evidence is damning. During the peak of the downstream drought in 2019, analysis by the Stimson Center found that China's section of the Mekong received normal to above-average rainfall. Yet Chinese dam operators restricted the river's flow by nearly 50%, causing water levels downstream to plunge to record lows, even as satellite imagery showed upstream reservoirs near full capacity. Brian Eiler, director of the Stimson Center's Southeast Asia program, put it bluntly: China largely ignored the needs of downstream communities when operating its upstream dams on the Mekong. If you're finding this deep dive into water geopolitics valuable, consider hitting subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing these important global stories to light. Thanks for being part of our community. Now let's get back to China's water strategy. The Mekong example reveals another disturbing aspect of China's strategy: data manipulation as a weapon. For years, China refused to share basic hydrological data with downstream Mekong countries. Then, in 2016, they established their own Lancang-Mekong Cooperation Framework, positioned as a gesture of goodwill. But independent scientists quickly spotted the deception. The data China shares is selective, often incomplete, and provided too late to be actionable for downstream nations. When the Stimson Center and Eyes on Earth published evidence of China's water manipulation using satellite data, Beijing didn't deny the facts. Instead, they launched a coordinated propaganda campaign, attacking the researchers' methodology while offering no substantive counter-evidence. The pattern is clear: control the water, control the narrative, control the region. China is now exporting this playbook around the world. In Kenya, Ethiopia, and other African nations, Chinese-built dams come with the same opaque management practices and asymmetrical power relationships. And it's not an isolated incident. In January 2021, China once again restricted water flow from the Jinghong Dam for grid maintenance, but only notified downstream countries 6 days after they started holding back water. If China is willing to use water as leverage during peacetime, what would they do during a crisis? The Mekong's devastation reveals a harsh truth about modern hydropower. These aren't green energy products as advertised. They're instruments of control. A single large hydroelectric dam generates clean electricity, yes, but a cascade of megadams transforms an entire river system from a natural resource into a managed machine, with one finger on the switch. The ecological destruction is just collateral damage in a larger strategic game. What makes this situation particularly insidious is the way China uses environmental rhetoric to justify its dam building. Beijing regularly touts hydropower as a climate solution and key to its carbon neutrality goals. When downstream countries raise concerns about water flow, Chinese officials speak of optimization and efficiency, technocratic language that masks raw power politics. Even the economic arguments are misleading. Research shows that many massive hydropower projects generate far less electricity than promised, while costing substantially more than projected. The Lower Sasan II Dam in Cambodia, for instance, will produce only one-third the power originally claimed, according to independent engineers. Yet the full environmental and social costs remain. While the Mekong crisis plays out, an even more dangerous situation is developing on the China-India border. China is now building what could become the world's largest hydroelectric project on the Brahmaputra River, an engineering marvel that would dwarf even the Three Gorges Dam's output. The location? Just 30 kilometers from India's border, in a disputed territory. This isn't just about electricity, it's about control over one of India's most crucial rivers. Even more frightening is the potential for water bombs, the sudden release of massive amounts of water that could cause catastrophic flooding downstream with virtually no warning time. During a previous border standoff in 2017, China stopped sharing hydrological data with India, critical information that helps prepare for floods and manage water resources. The result? Deadly floods swept through Assam, killing nearly 300 people and displacing millions. India, recognizing the existential threat, isn't sitting idle. They're planning their own massive dam in Arunachal Pradesh, the Upper Siang multi-purpose project, creating a dangerous dam-for-dam escalation. Caught in the middle is Bangladesh, one of the world's most water-vulnerable nations, which will suffer no matter who wins this hydro war. What we're seeing is nothing less than the militarization of water, but it gets even worse. China's water empire doesn't stop at its borders. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China has financed and built dozens of dams across Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, extending its hydrological influence worldwide. The pattern is clear. China offers attractive loans to developing countries for dam construction. Chinese companies build and often operate the dams. The host country becomes indebted to China, and China gains control over critical water infrastructure far beyond its borders. Take Laos, now dubbed the Battery of Southeast Asia. The country has fallen deep into debt with China, owing about $6.9 billion, half its entire external public debt. Of the 45 major dams on the Mekong system, 21 are in Laos, but on paper only. Most are built, financed, and controlled by Chinese companies. For example, the Namu River Cascade, 7 dams in northern Laos, is 85% owned by China's Power China, which will operate them for 29 years. This isn't just infrastructure development, it's hydrological colonization. The human cost of this water-based expansion is staggering and often hidden from view. In Cambodia, the Chinese-backed Lower Sason 2 Dam has devastated local communities. Over 5,000 people, mostly indigenous families who had lived along the river for generations, were forced from their ancestral homes. One Laotian farmer, displaced by the Namu Cascade, put it bluntly, "We used to catch fish from the river and grow rice on its banks. Now we have nothing. And for what? So they can send electricity to China." And if you think this is just a problem for Asia, think again. The implications of China's water hegemony extend far beyond the continent. When rivers run dry, crops fail. When crops fail, food prices surge globally. And when food prices surge, political instability follows. China is already the world's largest importer of soybeans and a major buyer of grain. If their water crisis worsens and their agricultural output collapses, global food markets will feel the shock. The water wars now unfolding could trigger waves of migration that dwarf anything we've seen in recent decades. Tens of millions of people forced to move as their water sources disappear or become contaminated. More immediately threatening is the potential for actual conflict. Water disputes between nuclear powers like China, India, and Pakistan add a dangerous new dimension to already tense relationships. If India feels its water security is threatened beyond a certain point, it may feel compelled to take military action. Pakistan, which depends on rivers flowing from India, faces similar pressures. And unlike oil, water has no substitutes. You can switch from oil to solar. Can't switch from water to anything else. This makes water the ultimate leverage point in 21st century geopolitics. The environmental consequences of China's dam-building frenzy extend far beyond water quantity issues. The entire ecological balance of Asia's great rivers is under threat. Consider sediment, the nutrient-rich soil particles carried by rivers from mountains to deltas and floodplains. Studies show China's dams have already reduced sediment loads on the Mekong by over 50%. This isn't just an abstract scientific concern. Sediment deposits are what make river deltas and floodplains fertile. Without them, agricultural productivity collapses. Vietnam's Mekong Delta, the country's rice bowl, is already showing signs of distress. Reduced sediment has accelerated coastal erosion, allowing salt water to infiltrate further inland. Some coastal areas are eroding at a rate of 30 meters per year. The dams also interrupt fish migration patterns. Species that evolved to swim upstream to spawn now find their journeys blocked by concrete walls. The Mekong, home to over 1,000 fish species, has already seen catastrophic declines in fish populations. One study by the Mekong River Commission estimates that by 2040, fish stocks in the lower Mekong Basin could decline by up to 40%, threatening the primary protein source for millions of people. Even the natural rhythm of rivers, the seasonal rising and falling that ecosystems depend on, has been disrupted. Plants and animals that evolved over millennia to sync their life cycles with these natural pulses now face an artificially managed flow. The combined effect is nothing less than ecocide on a continental scale. So what can be done to prevent this slow-motion catastrophe? The international community has limited options. Diplomatic pressure? China has shown it's willing to ignore international opinion when its core interests are at stake. Economic sanctions? Few countries are willing to jeopardize trade relationships with the world's second-largest economy over water issues. Military deterrence? Attacking dams is considered a war crime under international law and could trigger devastating retaliation. The most promising approach may be scientific monitoring and transparency. Satellite systems, like those used to expose China's Mekong water manipulation, make it harder to hide hydrological warfare. But the scientific community faces its own challenges in this water Cold War. Chinese academics who publish research questioning official water policy risk their careers, or worse. International scientific cooperation on transboundary rivers has become increasingly difficult as geopolitical tensions rise. Even basic hydrological data that was once freely shared is now treated as sensitive information with national security implications. China classifies detailed information about its dams and water management practices as state secrets. This information blackout extends to public health concerns as well. The pollution choking China's rivers doesn't stop at international borders. Contaminants from Chinese factories, mines, and farms flow downstream into neighboring countries. Testing by independent researchers has found elevated levels of heavy metals, antibiotics, and industrial chemicals in rivers leaving China. But without comprehensive monitoring programs and data sharing, downstream countries struggle to identify the sources of pollution or hold anyone accountable. One example, a 2024 study published in Science of the Total Environment found levels of arsenic, cadmium, and mercury in Vietnam's section of the Red River at concentrations up to 500% higher than World Health Organization safety standards. The source? Industrial waste from Chinese factories upstream. Medical researchers have documented rising rates of birth defects, cancer, and gastrointestinal diseases in communities that rely on these contaminated rivers. These health impacts represent the hidden human cost of China's water policies. Meanwhile, China continues to position itself as an environmental leader on the global stage while simultaneously building more dams at home and financing them abroad. This fundamental disconnect between rhetoric and reality makes addressing the crisis even more challenging. But the fundamental problem remains. As China's internal water crisis deepens, its control over foreign water sources will only grow more aggressive. The infrastructure is built, the strategy is in motion, and most of the world still hasn't woken up to the threat. Every day without action locks in this dangerous new reality. And with each new dam, the leverage shifts further in China's favor. For downstream countries, the options are bleak. They can submit to China's growing influence and accept whatever water Beijing chooses to release. They can build their own massive water infrastructure in a desperate attempt to counter Chinese control, or they can prepare for a future of increasing water scarcity and the social upheaval that follows. None of these options look promising. A worrying example of China's growing leverage. In 2020, Cambodia and Laos both walked back their criticism of Chinese dam operations after Beijing offered COVID-19 vaccine shipments and economic packages. Thailand similarly muted its concerns after China threatened to restrict outbound tourism, one of its key economic lifelines. Water has become China's most effective diplomatic weapon in Southeast Asia, more potent than economic pressure or military posturing. When a country controls your water, you think twice before challenging them on anything. The reality remains. When it comes to water, China takes what it wants. So what's next on the horizon? China's 14th five-year plan, 2021 to 2025, prioritizes hydropower development on the Brahmaputra River, raising fresh concerns in India as construction edges closer to the border. Some engineers have even floated proposals to divert water north, an idea with potentially catastrophic consequences for downstream nations. The North-South Water Transfer Project, China's approximately $62 billion attempt to redirect southern water to northern cities, has already moved over 60 billion cubic meters of water through 3 massive artificial canals. Now, planners are looking to extend this mega project to capture Tibetan river waters. Multiple water experts, including those who have studied China's water policies, have raised concerns about the international implications. The consensus among specialists is that China consistently prioritizes domestic water security over cooperative water management with downstream nations. And with climate change accelerating water scarcity across Asia, the pressure on all parties will only increase. The most alarming prospect isn't theoretical, it's already taking shape. Historical evidence shows how water conflicts escalate. When China restricted water flow during India's 2017 border standoff, it resulted in deadly floods. When they held back Mekong waters in 2019, it devastated agriculture across 4 countries. These weren't accidents, they were demonstrations of power. Now consider the stakes. China faces worsening droughts in its agricultural regions. A 2023 study in the journal Earth's Future projected that agricultural water scarcity in northern China could increase by up to 50% by 2030. When faced with domestic water shortages in the past, China's response has been consistent: prioritize internal needs at all costs. For India, water security is equally non-negotiable. After China announced its Brahmaputra Dam plans, Indian officials expressed serious concerns, with some characterizing potential water diversion as a threat to national security. Both nuclear powers view water as a matter of national security. Both are building massive dam infrastructure. Both face increasing climate pressures. The flashpoints are multiplying. The margin for error is shrinking. Beyond all geopolitical calculations lies an uncomfortable truth: the world's water crisis is accelerating. According to recent UN World Water Development reports, global water demand is projected to exceed supply by approximately 40% within this decade if current consumption patterns continue. The crisis China faces today is a preview of what many nations will face tomorrow. With about 2/3 of the world's population expected to live in water-stressed regions in the near future, the struggle for control of fresh water resources will only intensify. Water, not oil, has become the resource shaping the geopolitics of the 21st century, and China has methodically positioned itself to control the tap. The silent crisis unfolding across Asia represents a new kind of threat, not a spectacular explosion of violence, but a slow strangulation of life itself. With each passing day, the vice tightens. More dams are built, more rivers are tamed, more nations find themselves dependent on China's goodwill for their most basic needs. The world's attention remains fixed on traditional security threats, nuclear weapons, terrorism, conventional wars. But while we look elsewhere, the foundation of civilization itself, fresh water, is being weaponized. History teaches us that resources have always driven conflict. But water is different from gold or oil or land. You can live without gold, you can adapt to life without oil, but without water, there is only death. That's what makes China's water dominance so dangerous and so effective. It doesn't need to fire a single shot to bring nations to their knees. It simply needs to close the sluice gates. The countdown has begun. The dams are built. The strategy is clear. The only question that remains is whether the world will wake up before the rivers run dry. But what do you think? Is China's water empire a legitimate response to its own crisis, or a dangerous power grab that threatens global stability? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the geopolitical forces shaping our world. Now go watch 17 facts about China's collapse that seem fake but are 100% real. Or enjoy our video on China's collapse into poverty is worse than you think.